So I'm from France. I moved to Singapore in 2018 when I was 21 years old. Today I'm gonna tell you how I managed to move to Singapore at that age by myself. I had no help, no much money, and no plan to even go at the first place. So back in 2018, I'm studying to get my engineering degree. In my school, we are not studying something in particular, we just go with the flow. I've studied a bit of computer science, mechanics, and even business. But still, everyone has his own preference, and mine was computer science and project management. So during our third years, we have to do an internship overseas. It has to be a non-French speaking country. It's quite a difficult step during our studies because 3 years in, we don't have much experience and also knowledge, and then we have to go in a company and kind of prove ourselves. We did a first internship before, but it was only in a non-technical position. So for this 6 months internship that we have to do overseas, the level is way higher. We are really expecting us to go to a company and help them achieve something. And anyway, searching for an internship is always difficult, especially from overseas. What worked for me is LinkedIn. I really made sure that my profile on LinkedIn was on point. I tried to target companies with real need and not only big names, because I feel like the startups are more keen to get help from outside, and the process are usually not as strict as in bigger companies. And that's how I got in contact with that company, health tech company based in Singapore. Before that, I had no particular interest in Singapore. I was interested in Asian country, but more like Korea. But I knew I couldn't go to Korea because my Korean wasn't good enough to go to a company and do business. And looking closer at Singapore at that time, it really pleased me because they were saying that Singapore is super safe, Singapore is clean, and also it's English speaking. Moving to a different country where you don't know anyone and anything is so tough. If you are in the situation currently, I totally feel you. But searching about Singapore and seeing all that on the internet, the good things about Singapore, I knew it was gonna be somewhat okay. That's how I got the confidence of actually applying for the job and saying, okay, if I get the opportunity, I will just take it. From the time you apply, it's really a patience game, because then you have to go to the interviews, you have to fill in some papers, but also the company can choose to back out at any time of the process. So even if you are really motivated for the opportunity, you have to have some backup plan. In my case, I didn't really add any. I was really trying to push this opportunity because I wasn't interested in really anything. So luckily I got that internship and I was set to move to Singapore in June 2018, the 11th of June. To move to Singapore, there are 2 steps that you should take note of. Are you allowed to travel to Singapore, and do you have a budget to live in Singapore? For an internship, you have to get a work holiday pass, otherwise most likely it's going to be a work visa. I have a dedicated video about work pass, so I will just put it in the eye. But yes, in my case, I needed a work holiday pass. It's quite fast when you apply. Usually it takes less than a month. What you are getting after applying is not the pass. The actual pass is what they call in principle letter. So only saying that yes, you will be granted a pass when you reach Singapore. So what you have to do is you travel to Singapore with your IPA and you show it at the border. That's how they are gonna let you in Singapore, and then later on you have to go to the MOM to collect your visa. But yeah, anyway, the visa was really not an issue for me. But when it comes to the budgeting part, as a student and you want to move on the other side of the world, Singapore is 10k kilometers away from France, so of course you have to prepare for any eventualities. So yeah, as a student I really couldn't afford moving to Singapore. Basically I still was gonna be paid for my internship, but it was only covering the rent. So I found a room to rent on Facebook groups. That's really the best way I recommend for people to find a room to rent. If you're looking for a full apartment, then you can look on Property Guru, but for room to rent, best is really Facebook groups. But anyway, mine was 800 per month, and my internship salary was also 800 per month. It's quite on the lower end. I think nowadays the minimum you should get is 1.5, but honestly, if you can get more, just try to get more. I had just enough saving to cover the plane ticket, but then you have to get insurance and you have also like to enjoy the life here in Singapore. So what I did is I asked for grants from my school, but also the region where I'm from in France. So if you are in the same case, you cannot really afford to travel to Singapore, but you really feel that it would be a great opportunity, try to see if you can get grants from like any organization. Also consider scholarship if you are planning on studying in Singapore. Back then what I got was about 1,000 per month, so for me it was like more than enough to like provide for my students' need. If you want to check whether you will have enough to live in Singapore, you can go and see my video about the cost of living in Singapore, but also the video about the rising cost of living in Singapore. It's kind of like the updated version of the cost of living, because recently the rent especially has really increased in Singapore. So that's how I was settled to travel to Singapore. I just took the plane like everyone and I arrived in Singapore, and I'm telling that to everyone, but the first day I reached Singapore I felt like I really belonged here. Like I have the hot weather in Singapore like just hugged me, and I was feeling like everything was gonna be okay from now on. But sadly the first time I came to Singapore I was only set to stay for 6 months. I finished my internship. I tried to extend it because I had like more vacation time, but in Singapore the visas are really not flexible, so I couldn't do that and I just went back to France. I felt kind of terrible because I had no promises of going back, and like I knew like I was gonna go back to my routine and maybe get the same old habit, and maybe I would not keep the same motivation to go back to Singapore. But I told myself that I will try to work hard to go back to Singapore. Spoiler alert, I didn't work that hard. As expected, when I went back to France, I met my friends again and I went to school again and I was a student again. Like when in Singapore I was feeling like more active because I was going to work and I was being more independent. But like going back to France, I kind of like just went with the flow and with the system. But I mean, I still did great at school, so I still got my diploma. And even before I start thinking about it, it was time to do my final year internship. So I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but usually final year internship, you try to go somewhere where you want to get a full-time position as well. For me, I knew it was in Singapore, but not really like which company. I tried to apply for other companies than the first company I did my first internship with, but to be honest, I applied to quite a number of companies, but I got like no much answers. I don't know if it's because COVID was starting, so companies were more cautious about who they were hiring, but that's just how it went for me. So instead what I did, because I had contacts already in Singapore from my previous company, I just reached out to them again and asked if they would take me for another internship, and I made clear that I wanted a full-time position as well after that. So they say, oh yeah, okay, sure, you can definitely come back. Maybe because they were underpaying me. For my second internship they actually paid me a bit more, 1.5. So I think that this would be the minimum set now. So that's how I came back to Singapore to never leave ever again. Back then I was 22, 23. Now I'm 25. I'm gonna be 26 next month. The lesson learned here is like really contacts are everything in life. They can really save you and like help you in life. So always try to like keep good contact with the people that you are meeting, even if you don't need them now, you might need them later on. And of course, like try to also help people. Like we are in a world where everything gets really complicated, but if we can make it easier by being nice to people, it's also a good thing. Then concerning how I got full-time and how I turned my work holiday visa for my second internship into Espace, that's how I started. I actually have a colleague who resigned in the same team as me, and I just took his role. So yeah, thank you so much for resigning and giving me the opportunity. At this point, to be honest, I had like no criteria in terms of like the job salary or like the responsibilities. All I wanted was to stay in Singapore because like during COVID I knew that if I'm sent back to France when my internship ends, I won't go back so soon. And like we saw, like even after 1 year Singapore was still closed, like with the phasing and stuff. So I'm really glad that this is how it happens, and also my colleague is in a better place now, so nothing to worry about. So I started with an Espace. I know it can be scary for some people because Espace is not EP, and most of the expats in Singapore have an EP, but sometimes EP can be kind of like difficult to get, especially in like early career, because EP comes with like some regulation concerning the minimum salary. I think in my case the salary was just way too high for a startup to pay when I have like no much experience, even though they know that I can do a proper work. So yeah, I just went for the Espace. It didn't like prohibited me from doing anything. So if a company is offering you an Espace instead of an EP, I would say like just go for it. What you want is really the opportunity of working for that company and staying in Singapore. You will still be able to rent, to get a bank account in Singapore, so no worries. But actually just this month I converted my Espace into EP because my Espace had a duration of 2 years and it just ended this month, and my company had to apply for another pass, and they tried to apply for EP for me, and it got approved after being rejected once because the salary was still too low, but they were like keen on paying much to keep me and get me an EP. So now I'm on EP and I'm really happy because it's kind of like still a goal, even if Espace is great. Being on EP makes me like feel closer to like getting my PR also. Most likely I will be applying for PR next year. They say that you won't get PR like so easy after like staying only 3 years in Singapore, but I will still try to apply for it. I saw that recently OJ-san applied for PR also after staying 3 years in Singapore, and he got it. So first, congratulations, and it gives me hope. And anyway, even if I get rejected the first time, I know that I will keep applying until Singapore will like welcome me. That's about it for how I set up my life in Singapore and how I'm set up to live in Singapore for the next year at least, if not more. Feel free to share in the comment section your stories on like you in Singapore, and also how you end up on this video. Are you already living in Singapore or you are planning to move to Singapore? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye bye!